Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the writer of comics like The Power Fantasy and the soon-to-launch Die Loaded at Image Comics. It's Kieron Gillen. Thanks for coming on, Kieron.
It's lovely to be here. And also to hear the segue from your off-radio voice into your on-radio voice.
Is it that different?
Honestly, it's suddenly become very smooth. It's very exciting.
I mean, I've been doing this so long, you would think I would become somewhat professional at this job. So we were recording this on Tuesday, November 4th. It's the week before a big Wednesday for you as Die Loaded debuts and The Power Fantasy has a new issue drop. How are you feeling?
Okay. Like, it's one of these bits where, like, the sort of peristaltic wave, that's not the best word to use. That's gut movement. But there's a kind of peristaltic wave of releasing in that kind of, you do the big hype for the FOC, for the order cutoff, and then it's slow again. And then this is kind of the start of my ramp up again for launch. You know what I mean? Especially because we're going to Thought Bubble like a couple of days after. So in other words, I'm at the last bit before the final push and it plops into the world. That's not the best metaphor, really. I want to go back and think that again.
I mean, the thing that I think is interesting about the way that comics are structured is the fact that, like you mentioned it, final order cutoff, for listeners that don't know, or FOC, is the last time that comic shops can change their orders, preferably up. And so that is the last time you can theoretically make a difference in terms of whether or not they're going to order your book. And it's interesting, not to steal a word or a phrase that fits one of your books way too well, but like 3 weeks ago, the die was cast, right? And so, like, there's only so much you can do. Is it kind of, I don't know. I mean, is release day as big for you as FOC is, or are they just different species of the same thing for you?
Yeah, but they're just different beasts. And it's actually, the interesting thing right now is actually how messy FOC is. Sort of FOC releases. Because it's like, obviously, you did some articles about this, about the spreading of releases. But in the UK, like, the image book's almost always a week later, you know. So I'm hyping for this week, but I'm hyping for next week. And it's even worse with trades when it's spread out over a month. So there's certainly a gap there, but it's different. Like, a book coming back is a very different beast from launching a new book. It's more like kind of making sure everyone remembers that it exists.
Yeah.
Like, I would say, like, and there's slightly less concern. And I don't mean that in a bad way, in that kind of like, die is a proven thing that sells. So it's that kind of like, I'm less worried about, say, second issue drop off, because that's the kind of the bit. Because when you get issue one's FOC, you go, okay, where the numbers need to be, how likely it is, like, natural attrition will take you to those numbers. With die, it's a slightly different equation. But on the other hand, I've never brought back a big selling book. So, like, you know, I really don't know. So when the orders issue 2 comes in, it'll be interesting.
When did Die wrap? The first one, was it 2023?
22. I think it's just 2020. It must be 2020. Or
2020. Okay. Man, time is that, you know, the pandemic period just lost in my brain. But so it's been gone for a little bit. But I do think the interesting thing about it is, like, you have the RPG. So it's not like it was completely gone. And I'm guessing it's a book that's done fairly well in trades, given the target market and just the fit for it and everything. And so I kind of feel like, maybe not of all your books, but amongst your books, it's probably in the upper percentile for lasting flavor in your mouth in between volumes like that. Like, I kind of feel like if you're going to bring something back, it's probably going to be the type of book that people are going to still have top of mind for the reasons already laid out.
Yes. How can you miss me when you can't go away? That kind of thing. So, like, literally, you know, there's a Die RPG Discord. So I think about Die every day, normally, in terms of, like, moderating a forum. But, like, you know what I mean? Like, you're right. Yeah. It's an ongoing book. It's sold very well. It keeps on finding audiences, especially the RPG. You know, that the RPG has basically been going to, like, gaming events. And to some degree, like, Die Load is a lot about the experience of going to gaming cons and comparing them to other events. The idea of, like, these sort of how a gaming social engagement works in that kind of, I suppose my way of phrasing it is, like, Comic Cons are about commerce. And I mean that in the best possible way. You go to Comic Cons to buy stuff, possibly meet people, but also, like, it's primarily stuff. Like, rare stuff, unusual stuff, whatever. That's the roots. As opposed to, like, Wilcon, the literary Yugos, that kind of side. That is, like, you go there to meet your peers. Like, it's really collegial. No one makes any money at Wilcon. It's basically the vibe. Or at least you're very rare if you do. You pay to be there. Everyone pays to be there. Conversely, gaming cons at their heart, people go to game. Like every sort of, if you go to Indianapolis, every surface for like miles around the con center is basically said you can game here. So it's like that kind of, that's a different purpose. And whilst, the stuff sells there, all the other stuff is there. That kind of fundamental, those first, I don't know, like the first Gen Con being in Gary Gygax's basement, people got together to game. And this, all the way along, it's, yes, people bought stuff, but it's really, you get together to do these events. Anyway, that's going off into Die Loaded Spear. So yeah, it's always been there. So Die's been basically Die RPG won a couple of awards, which was really nice. It's there. And now it's back.
I do think it's interesting about like the kind of promotional windows, or like the simultaneous promotional windows where you have the FOC, but you also, you're like, oh yeah, I also have to remind people that they should read the comic when it comes out. And also you have this splintered bifurcation because it might be coming out at a different time in the UK. I think the thing that's, I don't know, when I was a kid, or when I was like 16, I had a job offer, or I had the ability to work for my favorite baseball team for a summer internship. And my dad told me, be careful about making your hobby your job because could make you not love it anymore. And I'm curious as to like, when you're making comics because you love comics, and you're making RPGs because you love RPGs and doing all these things, is it important for you to stay in love with comics rather than to just love them, so to speak? Like, do you try to find different ways to maintain your passion for comics in general so the varying promotional windows don't grind you into dust?
Like, that's a really good question. Of course, it's a trick. Like, I'm pausing here.
That's fine.
I don't know. It's like, you're aware that like when you're introduced to higher and lower, because it's like one of the things is like, I don't think I'll be launching another image book for a while. It's a lot of work. You know what I mean? Like between the Power Fantasy and Die, it's not like I don't think I've got it capable to do I have people to arrange the books and run stuff. My books take a lot out of me and they take a lot of time. So I'm aware that I would probably burn out if I tried to do another one. So I've got to move my energies in different spaces. And you sort of see that across my like career, and there's a sentence. The idea of me kind of stepping away and trying something else for a bit. I stepped away from superheroes for like years, and then I came back with Peter Cannon. And Peter Cannon almost explicitly is about, do I like superhero comics? Am I enjoying this still? So yeah, I don't know. Like, it's that kind of, you've got to find ways to make it fresh and interesting for you. And I've got a much longer rant about different models of creators, but like in terms of like where you end up wanting to go. But yeah, there's definitely an element of like, what are my energies right now? What am I interested in? And you need to listen to that. I mean, one of the classic things I do, if I'm aware that books getting harder to write is a real bad sign of it. I remember like, I was writing Angela for Marvel, and then I started doing my first Star Wars work for them. And instantly Star Wars was a joy and incredibly easy. I always say it's like playing the blues. I know how it goes. And that immediately made me realize very sharply that I need to get out of Marvel as quickly as I can in terms of the superheroes,
stuff. Right.
No, I need to be out. So that's what you listen to in terms of what actually is turning you on.
That makes sense.
Actually, it's one of the joys of writing for a living. I basically do what I do since I was 22 for money. Like I sit at the table and tap buttons. That's all I've done. But what I'm tapping buttons about has varied hugely. So that's kind of always on my mind.
Do you find that, I don't know, I think it's interesting. Like people love doing the whole, the horse race, like the comparing sales and doing all this stuff like that. And we can't really do that in comics anymore because sales charts are non-existent at worst and fake at best. And so I do think it creates an interesting situation where it's like we think we know what's going on, but the only person who really knows what's going on with Die Loaded and the Power Fantasy is you. How do you manage the emotional side of the commercial part? Because as much as we like to make it seem like cold and emotionless, is that tough?
Well, it's all about graphs. That's the kind of like, and John Hickman is very prepared for this in that larger truth.
He's built for it.
Yeah. I mean, like the numbers, numbers from vibes. And I'm very much lucky enough, like Power Fantasy is not a cheap book to do. Like everyone involved, are not cheap. There's expenses there. And I explicitly, on any of my creator-owned books, like I don't take any money up front. And it's explicitly any money we can get goes to everyone else. So that's kind of always the way I structure the projects. So that's one pressure. But I don't often think about that. I'm lucky enough that I do have money in the bank, so I can sort of do stuff in belief the project's going to eventually get, be worth my time. But that's not really the main pressure. I mean, the main pressure is the emotional pressure between your peers. Like the idea of, it's team management. It's which is an awful way of putting it. What you mean, it's like, like being on a band on tour. That's what an ongoing book's like. And the idea that every month this is going to happen. The moment we ask, oh my gosh, I've got to write all the back matter again. You know what I mean? Or like you can sort of get that in the bit at the back of the Power Fantasy when I'm doing this, you know, the little bit of the indicia.
Mhm.
Like I'm like, you can tell that I've just had to write that just before we've gone to press, and that kind of Katie West, leave me alone. Why did we say yes to Ryan's stupid idea? Because it's a
That
good
was
idea.
Ryan's idea?
Yeah. Or rather, Ryan came up with like the whole idea of the back page. Like it says he wanted to make something. He was interested in the quasi academia, quasi medicinal kind of thing. And he saw like multiple languages, and I of course put my additional twist to it, which is, well, I definitely want to include secret messages in it.
Yeah.
That kind of all my favorite magazines when I was a kid that hid stuff wherever they look, and it's one of those things that I sort of think about as a project, and that I kind of like work that rewards you more the more you give it them. You know what I mean? Like, here's a world you can lose yourself in. And, you know, Dies like that. Wick Did was like that. You know, Power Fantasy is like that. That's kind of the idea. The more you give it, the more it'll give you back. And and hopefully reward people who are also less committed to the nonsense.
I can tell you, I mean, I don't know how often people mention it, but I always read the back indicia. Like, it's next level back matter. It's literally back cover matter. But for listeners that don't know, I'm going to hold this up. You can't actually see it if you're not watching, but there's an entire page back cover of indicia on every issue of the Power Fantasy that includes a secret message that Kieron writes. And I had no idea that Ryan was the one who was the impetus for that. It does make me wonder though.
Passing, can I just tell you a truth here very quickly?
Let's hear it. This is Ryan Hughes, by the way, designer.
Yeah. Amazing designer, Ryan Hughes. Like, we had to find someone to translate every single language and check it. We get people completely complaining about each other's translations, like, which you can't win because we don't speak the language.
Right.
And the horror when Image moves printer, like we say we, I mean me, and Katie, we have to find the word and translate it and work out how to, in all those languages. You know what I mean? It's a ridiculous amount of work for something that really doesn't matter, except it also really does matter. So yeah.
And that's what I was kind of getting at is like, I don't know, like you've always struck me as somebody who tries new things with projects to keep things fresh for yourself. How do you think of your projects? Like the Power Fantasy is interesting to me because it's like, I mean, all of your books are like this, all comics are like this, but to some degree, but I feel like the Power Fantasy is very much like you could look at it on like a by panel basis or a by page basis, but the best way to look at it is collectively as an issue because every element feeds into the other ones. How do you think about your projects? Is it in that way where it's like the issue is a singular unit, or do you think it on a smaller basis than that or a bigger basis than that?
I think like, especially with the Power Fantasy, it's like, okay, what is this project? Like the Power Fantasy existed as an idea for quite a long time, like not a huge amount of time, but a significant amount of time before me and Casper went. And Casper is the person who makes the project, or the artist is, as in, because I remember thinking like, just choose a name, Jason Burrows, let's say. I talked Jason into doing it. It would suddenly be much more clean edge militaristic. You know what I mean? And the second you got Casper involved, it's lighter, it's a bit more playful. We're going to play with more of the music side of it. You know what I mean? Like, so that's where the project solidifies. So you think about it on the really high level, what is this book? And it's the whole, especially something like my ongoing, what's the story here? So the Power Fantasy, as people I think probably realise by now, has a big structure. Like I've pretty firmly know what we're doing all along. And will become increasingly more evident as we progress. So that's the big structure. And then the smaller structure is the individual ones. And so, okay, what is this issue? Like, in some ways, I mean, the Power Fantasy is me, I don't think I'll do an ongoing like this again. Like, you know, I think, I can't see myself doing an ongoing like this is the emphasis. As in, like, possibly something else. But, like, this sort of structure, this kind of pop art comic, this kind of, like, pocket novella or novel or whatever it is, whatever I have done for like my kind of career of bangers, basically. I call it the banger bit.
Yeah.
That's an execution thing, because the other thing, second you've got the big ideas, you start thinking about smaller ideas, as in, okay, this sequence is important, you know, or these are the building blocks, and the issues are the building blocks. And the point of a sort of an ongoing comic is it's an ongoing comic. You know, the individual issues are art objects. And I'm not somebody who's naturally a single issue comic person. I'm a trade person. You know, that's kind of my natural unit. So I've really got, over the time, I've really worked to make single issues worthwhile. You know, that kind of like, what would it take to make me buy a single issue? And I try to do that. As in, these are big, what's the strengths of the single issue? So it's partially the aesthetic coherence. It's partially the structure of the issue in terms of like the design, the other elements in the comic. All that stuff comes together. And like, so that's one unit. And at the time, the other higher level unit is the, what is an arc? Where did the issue, it's basically an arc, say 5 issues. Each issue is a sort of a big cliffhanger ending. That's not true. Each issue has a major reveal that is enough to make you want to read the next issue. And the last one in the arc is probably the biggest. And that for the single issue readers is a climax. And for the trade issue, that's the gap between 6 months between trades. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that kind of peristaltic wave structure is kind of the way this kind of ongoing comic works. And that's kind of the joy. It's like, you were sort of saying maybe like create your own ongoings are kind of like an endangered species, like in that kind of way. So if we're going to do it, we're going to do it. And this is kind of everything I kind of love about month by month, what the hell's happening. You know what I mean? And that was, to me, is the thrill of it, I think.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Are you ready to face the future? Look no further than 2080. It's the galaxy's greatest comic. Every week, 2080 brings the best in sci-fi and horror, featuring characters like Judge Dredd, Rogue Trooper, and more. Get a print subscription to 2080, and it'll arrive through your mailbox every week, and your first issue is free. You'll also receive the 100-page 2080 Christmas special this December at no extra cost. Or subscribe digitally, and you can download DRM-free copies of each issue for only $9 a month. That's 128 pages of incredible comics every month for less than $10. Head to 2080.com and click on subscribe now, or download the 2080 app and start reading today. And now, back to the show. Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense. And also, it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like what I said, where you have to keep things fresh. It's like sometimes you have to like change up how you think about stuff to make sure you don't get bored, I'm sure, to some degree. But I do want to talk about Die Loaded first. It's your new series that arrives on November 12th, so like 2 days after this actually goes up. It's at Image Comics, and it's the sequel to your previous series, Die. It's from you, artist Stephanie Hans, letterer Clayton Coles, designer Ryan Hughes, and editor Katie West. Here's the solicit. Die returns for an epic news story of a dark fantasy adventure game gone horrifically right or wonderfully wrong. A year after their return from the hellish game world, the players gather for Chuck's wake. They're finished with the game. The game isn't finished with them. The 3-time Hugo Award nominated series is back in November. Get ready to roll initiative. Who's going to die this time? I've read the first issue. It's fantastic. Let's start with the big question. Have you figured out how to talk about it yet?
Yeah, I mean, you don't. Basically, my mail to retailers is pretty amazing, isn't it? Kind of like people who don't know about Die and want to jump aboard. They can, hopefully. You just do the pitch for the first book. It's Goth Jumanji. You know,
Yeah.
it is, yet again, it's got an aesthetic coherence. People get sucked into a role-playing game, but it's bleak and human and adult and serious. So that's the easy way to sell it. Then kind of people who already read Die, like, hopefully I don't need to sell them as hard.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
They're already in.
you know, you're already in. And I start talking about the themes of the book. Because in some ways, like the first Die was about a group of people who learn. There's multiple levels of themes of Die, but the kind of the personal human plot was a group of people get to know each other better via the medium of games. As in they start sitting down at a game and they play together. Whilst Die Loaded is kind of about people who don't know each other as well, discovering each other through a game. So in other words, it's like essentially pick-up games. As I mentioned earlier when I said earlier about the con. Yeah, Gen Con, exactly. Gen Con is the ultimate expression of that, as in going to a far-off place and meeting strangers and having an experience together with them. And to be honest, walking away knowing that person. Like, I've certainly gone to Gen Con, oh, I hate that guy. Or that guy really grated me. You know, not even because they did anything wrong, just because we had bad chemistry. Because that's people. People don't always get on, which is also fine. So that's kind of it. The other kind of big theme is about, like, the cascading hand-grade effects of trauma. It's kind of like, it picks up from the book. It picks up, like, a year after the first one ends at Chuck's memorial service. You know, Chuck, who died in the first volume. Spoilers. And like, we did so much about the awful traumatic event being away, and also the sense of separation all the cast had, because they had no idea what was going back on Earth. So that was so much what the first book was about. The second one was about, but life went on, you know, and all your loved ones were going for their own individual hells. And we picked this up in the trailer. Like Sophie, Ash's wife, like, you know, she had a kid, and she had COVID, and she had, as it turns out, her husband disappears for like 2 years. and she has every reason to think he's dead due to the fact that Chuck's body turned up.
Right.
And she was single parenting, all these kind of situations piling up on top of each other. And that's what she went. And that's one example. And it's kind of like, to turn it into RPG sort of language, like I'd say the theme is no one's an NPC. It's one of those, it's an awful meme that's going around, calling people NPCs. And it's just nonsense. Like, it's this literal, the dehumanization of it is, it's stomach turning and ultimately like eliminationist. And that's kind of using RPGs to sort of look at that a bit. And it's more like anytime you look closely at any character you're writing, the closer you look, the more you see there. And you start, and it's really one of the great joys of the book is that it gives me a chance to turn over characters and see them from different lights. You know what I mean? So that's the character side. And the other way of doing it is like comparing it to Singles Club. Like I always play a Die to Phonogram. Phonogram was about a book about how music shapes the people who listen to it, specifically autobiographically. And Die is the sister book. It's me specifically talking about games, and how games interact with people, and also my own journey as games has an impact in my life, and how it juxtaposes. In the same way, Phonogram was designed to be in another universe. Me and Jamie could have done Phonogram stories forever. Iris was demanding I play Fight the Power in the bath the other night. And that's the only song of mine she likes. And that's a Phonogram story. And like my dad left me a mixtape when he died. That's a Phonogram story. That sort of stuff. I will be hopefully very old and still thinking about pop music. And the same way Die is kind of built on the same structure. As in, the first one was a really coherent thing, I like to think. And the second one shows, and it's also this. The idea of that this kind of could go in a different direction. And like, we're starting quite close, but we kind of, it opens the door to expanding outwards. And the third thing I'd sell, this is in very long, is that there's so much of Die we haven't explored. Me and Stephanie, on the basic nerd level, have basically gone to about a third of the map.
Do you have a map?
So
I mean, of course you have a map. You have an actual RPG.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we haven't shown anyone the map. That's not in the RPG. But like, there's so much other bits of the world that me and Stephanie haven't shown. You know what I mean? So like, and since so much of the project was, I want to show the world a Stephanie Hand's fantasy universe. We've got to do that too. So they're the kind of three main things.
Yeah. I mean, it totally makes sense. It is amazing to think about how much Gen Con, now that you talked about it, really does reinforce, actually not reinforce, provide the foundation for this second volume, because I don't think it's a spoiler to say that, like, you already kind of said this is, if the first one was about a group of friends going into a game, then this one is more about the assembled randomness that can kind of happen with these sorts of games if there's a new campaign. And I think, I don't know how you feel about this. I've long had a theory that like online video game playing is basically like the world's greatest sociology test, where you can really understand a person through how they play games. And for better or worse, mostly worse, to be honest, with online video games. I feel like it's a lot more agreeable in RPGs. But I think that that's the interesting thing about all these things, is like, whether you're playing an actual RPG or going physically into the world of an RPG, fundamentally it's about the self and character being expressed within a group. And I think that is such an interesting, dramatic thing that you did really well in Die. And I think Die Loaded, I mean, like I said, I've read the first issue, no spoilers. It's set up very well to go in maybe even a more interesting direction. We'll see.
Thank you. There's a bit when I was writing that first issue, like it was going well. There was like mixture of human stuff, but it wasn't feeling like Die. You know what I mean? When it was bugging me, and it's basically, and then suddenly there's like I do an entire page sequence where a character is remembering seeing a fox in her garden, and she just talks about the fox, and suddenly it was like Die. Like, it's the frustrating thing about Die is that we could just do a fantasy adventure of someone dragged into it. We could do you could literally do it straight, like it's Saw but D&D. You could do that version of the game. Evil GM, players, yada, yada, yada. But we don't do that. It's strikingly mundane. It goes out its way to really talk about the human stuff. It is about like foxes in the garden and remembering like stuff in hospitals and that one book your dad gave you and all these kind of things are what Die are powered by. The fantasy is a way to externalize the memories and trauma and everything else, but the world itself is about the people. Like, it's literally is about them. And that's one of the bits where in passing, that's where the game works. In that, it's all about the people make up messed up people, and the game teaches you how to do that. Then you drop into a fantasy world, and it also teaches you how to take up the messed upness and throw it back at them, externalizing their. So, like, give your daddy issues, turn your daddy issues into a dragon and fight the dragon in the banal way. And that's Die. It's about the human and the ridiculous.
I love it.
Fantastical.
So you talked about this a little already, that like Die of all your books was kind of, it's more naturally fitting a return. But it's also not historically been your style to go back to places that you've been before necessarily. You went back and did Singles Club for Phonogram, but that was in continuation with before you did Wick Div or Young Avengers or anything like that, I think. Why did you want to bring Die back in this new series?
The comparison to Phonogram was very apt in that way, because we did the 2 series, then we brought back a third Phonogram like halfway through
the Material Girl. Yeah.
But Phonogram was designed at the start to be a device to tell further stories. Like in the same way, Die was something we designed to tell stories about. So right at the start, even though the rest of the world don't know it, we always conceptualized it. Yeah, we conceptualized it as a device to tell stories. In the same way, like Phonogram, if we carried on, there was a story I wanted to do, like set in the World Fair in 1893 in Chicago, about because recorded music was on one side of the river and performed music was on the other. City of art, city of technology. And I wanted to do something about the birth of pop music set in 1893. And that would be a very radically different sort of Phonogram story. But it would also hopefully be self-contained. Die's a bit like that, I hope. In that kind of like, here's a device that allowed me to interrogate RPGs, and I don't see an end to it per se. Until Stephanie says, I am bored of this, and we move on. But, like the fact that Stephanie was, actually, it's worth talking about, because Stephanie came over to my house when I was living in London. We had a little summit in the garden, and we just went through, I basically, here's what I'm thinking, and she's pitched stuff back at me. Like, it's a really intimate working, as in, like, I think more than any of my creator-owned books, it's the one where the artist has the most impact at a story level. Often, like Casper and Jamie were always about execution. That's what they do. And Dan, how to explain me and Dan? That is almost a classic Marvel relationship in that kind of Dan.
Are you talking about for Once and Future?
Yeah, Dan Morrow Wants the Future. He does it. You know what I mean? Like, he has the script, and then there's so much of writing for Dan Morrow is just getting the hell out of the way and writing an action comic. And specifically, what can I do that make Dan, entertain Dan this month? If you've got 30 issues with like the greatest action storyteller of his generation, you probably got to work out something cool for him to draw.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, so you have the idea that you want to bring it back. At what point did you start talking to Stephanie about it?
I think we always knew early on. It was kind of explicitly when we did what we called them giants. It was that kind of, we don't want to go straight back to Die. Let's go do something else. So, and it's like Stephanie, I think it was always just assumed, because we kind of talked about roughly what the idea was for the series. Like, if we talk down the line, I can tell you exactly. Of course, if you go back to Die, the first one, there's probably one panel you'll realise this is Kieron knowing he has to do what he does in the next series. Like, there's literally one panel where I actually kind of mea culpa to the reader. And that's where I knew what Die 2 was going to be. Or Die. I think I knew it was going to be Die loaded almost instantly. I think maybe Stephanie, part of me thinks that was Stephanie's pun, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like, it's just a device. Like, I want to do Die stories as long as we can. And the fact it kind of, it works with the RPG. It's kind of, in some ways, Die is a very powerful expression of my basic belief that art should be democratized and you have power. You can do it. Like, I've literally given you, I've written the book of how to do a Die story at home for yourself. Like Die, and the RPG is structured so you can do it. And that's kind of like my punk rock stuff. That's the kind of, like, in Phonogram was a device to, you can think of yourself as a wizard. Think of yourself, your loves as a thing that powers you. And, Wicked Divine was more about, Wicked Divine was the trick in terms of think of yourself as a god, but you're not a god. Because that's literally the kind of, the educational aspect of that, I guess. I mean, I hate that phrasing, but that's what it's about. My note to my younger self. But yeah,
I do think it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting because Die's story continues every day whenever somebody plays the game. Exactly. And it's like, it's outside your hands. And I do think it's interesting, though, that you said that, like, Stephanie is a closer, she has more effect on the story than any of your other artistic partners, which kind of makes sense with the nature of the book, right? Is that she is I mean, she's a player in the game. She's a player character, as you put it. You know, it's funny. I've only thought of NPCs. I've never thought of a PC before. And I actually Googled player character because I never even considered what that phrase meant. I was like, oh, that's me. I'm a player character.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's interesting to think about like how that type of thing affects the book. The funny thing is the only conversation I've ever had with Stephanie was absolutely delightful. It was at a party at New York Comic Con a couple years ago, and we talked about high-end spas. And like apparently she has like unbelievable taste in spas, and like she was recommending, she's like, you want to go to a good one in New York? Here's this one. I was like, holy shit, you were like an encyclopedia of amazing spas. So now I'm just waiting for the spa section of Die, which I don't believe exists, but you know, that's the amazing thing when you bring in another player character. I mean, her impact could show up in a lot of different ways and a lot of unexpected ways, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. It sounds like there's here's an example of actually stuff for the Die fans in that we showed like a handful of the 12 gods of Die, and like we pretty much in issue 1 we'll show the rest of them, and then kind of we get a chance to explore them all. And like there's one of the gods which is for me expressly based on Stephanie.
Oh my god.
And you'll probably know them when they turn up, and you'll kind of realize why we've based her on Stephanie. But yeah, that's my homage to the wonder that is her.
I absolutely love that. Now you want me to bring up that page and look through it. But okay, so you have the idea of the return. You've talked to Stephanie. You're building that out. The book starts, you know, we know from the preview that Ash, or Dominic Ash as their full name is, factors in. Regardless of what the story may or may not be and who may or may not be part of the campaign, did you always know that you needed to kind of, not perfectly, but roughly speaking, pick it up from where the first volume left off?
I think it's one of this. So you either pick it where it left off and show where they've been, because you know Die was left deliberately hanging in terms of the narrative space implied by the ending. I think you can't do anything with any of the people in the first story without touching on some of that. You know,
right?
The other alternative, literally have a group of people on the other side of the world finding the dice. You know, that's the other way of doing it.
Yeah.
But I had stuff I wanted to do. You know, in some ways, it's like how to phrase this one. Yeah, I felt there was if you've sort of, it's fine with leaving stuff unanswered until it's not. It's the best way of putting it. Stuff implied where your imagination can go isn't the same as just ignoring it when you go back there, I guess, is what my kind of thing. So I definitely felt like there's stuff I wanted to talk about. And the book is kind of, it's about the extended cast we're in, but also indirectly. You know what I mean? It's like, I said, this is the stuff that's hard to talk about, as it's absolutely about the people we know, but it's also not about them as well.
Yeah.
And it's about expanding the reality of the cast in that way. I mean, I mentioned like Sophie's a good example. Like she's quite important in the first issue, but like Sophie, plot-wise,
Sophie, the wife of Dominic Ash.
Yeah. She's like supportive in the first issue. She tells Sol's mum to go away. Basically, she's referred to a couple of times. But there's even a bit where Ash basically says, I don't talk about her much, do I? Like in issue 14 or whatever it is. And that was, that sort of stuff. Because the nature of stories with protagonists tend to undermine the reality of everyone else. This is one of the problems of fiction. Like the second you start following someone around, they become protagonist. Everyone else, just the way stories work, become players, players, NPCs, and it's nonsense. You know what I mean? Like, so the wonders of, this is one of the things I think I hope I nail better in this one. Like Die, when I originally had the idea, was this is going to be a very clean and beautiful character drama. That was my plan. As I just said earlier, you take people, you put them in the fantasy world, you externalize their regrets and hopes, you come to a conclusion and hopefully catharsis. And then immediately, like within a month or so, I'd actually started telling the entire history of the role-playing game as well. And, so all that typical what I do is in too much. And Die Loaded strips down a little bit. So we've still got the critical essays in the form of adventure stories, but it's not, we don't have to do the world building again because the world is built. We don't need to go to the history of RPGs. We know that. So it's a little bit more about the juxtaposition between individual characters, stories and personal life, and a bit of RPG history. Like, for example, like the second, I slightly spoiled the second issue. No, it's in Solicit, so I can do this. Second place to go is the Realm of Art. That's a really good example. Like the Realm of Art, and one of the person's relationship with art is the character side of it, but it's also about what art is used for in RPGs. And that's a good example of like why I want to do a sequel anyway. Also, go to a region we hadn't seen, because the first die is very writer-centric. You know, it's not only writer-centric, but it does include much about the visual side of RPGs. So, like, going back to sort of talk a little about, okay, what is art for? Not, you know, what is visual art for? That's an example of an area we haven't touched. And all the way through, like the first 6 issues, which are all drawn and lettered, which is really weird to think about. Like, just different tones. Like, there's just, like, issue 4's really funny. Issue 5's a big kind of literary deep dive, but on a really bleak personal story. You know what I mean? Like, there's a kind of, that's the fun of a die in that way. And actually, you mentioning modularity. This is a very modular story as well. As in, we've got a really useful device, I think, for the first 6 issues, but it's also really modular. So I almost wonder, like, could you pick up an individual issue and get it? Because we do explain stuff.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. This January, Oni Press proudly presents Spirit of the Shadows #1, the most visually dazzling and hauntingly heartfelt superhero horror hit of 2026. A stunning new 5-part series drawn from the darkest recesses of the imagination of co-writers Nick Cagnetti and Daniel Ziegler, and featuring the first full-length artwork by Cagnetti since his electrifying debut with 2022's Pink Lemonade. Once, Eric LaRue was a mortal musician until his sudden death plunged his soul into the carnival-like torments of the spirit world beyond our own. Now, reborn as a phantom, Eric will claw his way back from the infernal planes and avenge the dark sins that transform him into the Spirit of the Shadows. In the tradition of Jack Kirby's The Demon, Mike Allred's Madman, and Todd McFarlane's Spawn, Spirit of the Shadows is an eye-popping new addition to the canon of creator-owned superheroes. Find it in comic shops everywhere this January, only from Oni Press. And now, back to the show. I do want to say, you mentioned it's like a more oriented on visuals. I don't know why. Maybe this is just me taking my own business into it, or maybe because I'm looking on a very bright screen or something like that. But I feel like Stephanie's stuff, her work on the first volume is great. She's an amazing artist, but it feels cleaner and it feels, I don't know, like everything about it feels more poppy. Not poppy in like in a, Wiccan Divine phonogram sense, but in the sense that it just like literally pops. And I don't know what it is about it. It just feels like she's really figured out, like you all laid the foundation. Now she's like, how do I build the best version of this for myself? And it's amazing work.
She's astounding. Like, the thing about Stephanie is, like, she's I use the metaphor of the sea always with Stephanie, as in she's this tempestuous creator that she'll go in these directions and explore, and she's not methodical in that way. Like, she will like, I want to try this and push here and play, and there's also like her roughs. And when she basically does her roughs, which are very rough, and then she paints up from there, and there's a lot about feeling it in and find the sculpture in that kind of way. Yeah, she's always kind of trying to push it in different ways. And I think she's all, like any artist, or like most artists I'm aware of, there's always, is this good enough? Or is this kind of right now? Is this, because, especially with Stephanie, who isn't a moving target, so it isn't a stationary target, she hasn't got a style that sticks to it. She kind of plays and builds and, as I said, sculpts. Yeah, I think it feels very differently, but also gives them more. Oh, but worth stressing, by the way, I mean, specifically the second issue is more about art, but like, as it's about the theme. But broadly speaking, across the first 6 issues, you can see her pushing in different places. Like, there's actually one really beautiful formless sequence in issue 5, which entirely her. And I get her to do a grid in issue 4. Shockingly. Like, for the first time in my life, I talked Stephanie Hans into doing a grid. And it's for a comic sequence, and she absolutely nails it. So, yeah.
You quite literally put her in a box. How dare you?
Honestly, I wrote a grid once for Stephanie in issue 1 of the first die, and it came back as these diagonal slashes down the page. and I was like, okay, I'm never asking her to do a grid again. Why would I cage the tiger? Why would I do such a thing?
I like hearing that, though, because that means that you're and Stephanie, I mean, again, having a very brief conversation, this seems like her. I feel like it's hard to put her in a box. She feels like the type of person where it's like, oh, I'm going to prescribe this. And she's like, no, that's not how that works. Visuals in my world. We're doing this.
It's not quite that, but it's more like she likes to, because she understands story, but she likes playing.
Oh, no. She finds the best answer.
Like, yeah. There's a kind of one. I really like when I teach comics, there's specifically a few Stephanie pages I show. Because basically, since Die is about world creation, the scripts are heavy. So I've got a long descriptions. I say, okay, all these ideas, could try this. And then at the end, I put too long, didn't read, somebody's hand. Because it's the kind of, Stephanie needs both of them. And Stephanie kind of needs the kind of brief. the artist's brief. Here's some ideas. Here's some cool stuff. Here's some reference. Build on this, but also the specifics of what's the actual story we're telling here. And
Yeah.
you vary that depending on the artist. And Stephanie's kind of the give her the toys, let her play.
We need to talk about a new character in the series who appeared in the preview for the first issue, so I can talk about them. He is a baby named Stuart. He's very interesting to me because this baby was born during the pandemic, and that was a name, I looked it up, that reached an all-time low in usage as a baby name during 2020 and 2021. Is this character a personal effort to bring a resurgence of the name Stuart into the world? Because what are we doing here? Stuart's new.
Bringing Stuart back. Like, honestly, I think like I was just vaguely finished. I was looking around the background of different names because Stuart was a different name originally, I think, at some point, and it just became Stuart. And like anytime anything mysterious happens in Die, it's always, it's just Die messing with us. Because, it's literally, I'm aware that we're being manipulated by this entity outside time and space that is bringing Die into being, and I'm dooming us all. And of course, you're interviewing Grant next. Yeah, you're about to interview Grant next week, so I'm sort of setting up Grant in terms of the. We have Grant to defend us from the amoral god that I have summoned.
Did you have anything else to say about Stuart? I just think it's funny because
I haven't got much. Like, I generally have to go back to my notes because there's some thinking about it. And so basically, it's a sturdy Scottish name, and there's a kind of like we don't talk about it, but like Sophie's got Scottish roots in that kind of way. That's the kind of when I got to Stuart, I think.
My main thing was when I read that, I was like, Stuart, a baby in like 2020, 2021. I was like, I don't think that's that common of a name anymore. And I looked it up and I was like, man, it actually has had a resurgence in the last 3 years, which is hilarious. I know way too much about the name Stuart now. So
that is interesting. I mean, Kieron was a weird enough name that my name was in the local paper the year I was born. So it's like I was literally in an article about names in Stafford, and like unusual names include Kieron. And it was that something like maybe Stuart is like 2021 Kieron.
Maybe you're tapping into some sort of energy that's in the world. This is the amoral god playing. But I did want to ask about one other RPG thing. You have an RPG module that you created for Criminal that will debut in December's Giant Size Criminal #1, which Ed Brubaker asked you to do, right?
Yes.
What was the experience like? And I don't know, like, how do you go about turning something that is very much not an RPG into an RPG?
Well, it's one of these bits where, like, I'm not sure what Ed was expecting because Ed knows RPGs. It's not, Sean doesn't, as in it's not his kind of thing. So he said, "How much space we got?" About 6 pages. I said, "Okay, I'll go away and think." So there basically was 2 options. One is do it as a comedy game, do it like a couple of stats, make it silly. That would have worked. That would have been fun. And there's the other way. Can I get a storytelling game out of this? Can I get something which basically does what, to some small degree, because it's only 6-page small game, what Die tries to do? Can we give something, make your own Criminal-like story in an evening? So what I did was I went away and read all the Criminal, which is nice. Tell you, if you haven't read them all back to back, try it, because it's like, they're all so good and they're so modular. I think people forget how good they are.
Yeah.
As in the fact that all good individual novels means you forget there's a larger structure and it's such a intertwined, beautiful thing. So I read it all. Okay, what are the core of a criminal story? What can I do? And that's where it kind of came from. And it's a mixture of me grabbing stuff which is a bit like Flash and like just things to make it feel criminal, and stuff which is a bit more structural. So the game is basically you or people back at the Undertow playing a game of cards after a successful heist. You're holding cards, and the game is structured by a series of flashbacks to how the heist went, and the things that happen along the way are basically decided by the cards people play. So, and the aim of the game is to win most hands against the dealer, and so you get essentially a happy ending, but also try to get a secret objective you all have, which is won by depending on what cards you have at the end of the game in your hand. And that basically creates a narrative structure. Ideally, the goal was, okay, criminal. It's not a criminal story unless you find yourself shot through the back of the head by your childhood friend because you ripped off the heist for the money to pay for your, yada, yada, yada. It's got to have that. So that's what the game's structured around. You do the heist in flashback, and then you, with these very strong archetypes, all set in the criminal world, but it all kind of builds towards this big reveal at the end where everyone's secrets come out, and then it cascades onwards. So it's a little, simple short story. There's a few like small rules, like it suggests if you're narrating like a scene in the heist, use first person omniscient short sentences. So like just talk about like Kieron walked into the bar He looks, that kind of, he looks. So in the same way, every second story, Ed basically does the third person omniscient narrator. If you start narrating like Ed, it makes it feel more criminal.
Yeah.
Which is, you know what I mean? Like, and everyone trying to do it, it's also playful. When I've play tested it, it's just funny. There's a fundamental funniness of you doing a noir story around the table.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun. It's simple. It's in the back. It's, I'm quite proud of it.
I love it. I mean, it's funny. You could do this for any image book. This could be your next side gig is doing RPGs for everything.
It's a lot
RPG
of work.
The Walking Dead. I know.
I joked it really is a lot of work. Oh, I should mention in passing, so before we move on from Die, there is we're doing if you're in the comic shop, we're doing a Die edition of the RPG.
Yeah.
So it's a comic format version of Die RPG's Quick Start. So like if you're in the shop and buying Die Loaded, you'll be able to just, if you've been intrigued by any of what I've said, there's like, it's a 56-page comic format in, I think, $7. So, it's not that expensive. If you're interested in Die RPG, it's a really great chance to play it. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. You should definitely pick that up. But I want to move on to the Power Fantasy, something else that's a lot of work for you. I do. It is okay for listeners that don't know. It's your Image Comics series with Casper Wingard, Clayton Coles, and Ryan Hughes about an alternate version of our world that stars a group of 6 superpowered individuals, and it's about the ongoing Cold War between them that has never gotten hot because, as the solicit says, the planet's survival relies on them never coming into conflict. I'm not spoiling anything that happened. It might get a little hotter than I'm letting on. 2 arcs in. You said you had this one pretty well thought out going in. How is it adding up relative to your expectations? Is it pretty much what you expected, or where are you at with that now?
Story-wise, it's like kind of where I was expecting. I'm right. I've got a draft of issue 16, so the entire first movement is kind of done up to there. I mean, it's still to nail down 16. It's one of those bits where, like, specifically to make the last 2 issues of that bit work, I need to write them both at once to make sure it all works. And then I end up actually moving a scene from issue 15 to 16 to make sure certain things had more space to breathe. You know what I mean? So that's probably the biggest change to the structure. Like, it's tricky to work out, like, what do you expect? It's like, Power Fantasy's doing really well. It's one of those situations where, like, I know, like, I've had a variety of people ask me about issue 12. In fact, various people came to ask Casper, say, what are you going to do after Power Fantasy then? Because they presume, you know what I mean? Like, guys, back off. Like, it's one of those situations where it's, for an indie book in 2025, we're doing really well. But it's that kind of like, they're always a bit marginal. And it's that kind of like, I want to make people aware that you should never count your chicken, that you should never assume that this book will carry on. It's more like, that kind of, I can stop supporting it now, I'll wait for the omnibus. Do
you mind if I say something really quick?
Please do.
So in the back of the Power Fantasy number 12, Kieron wrote in the back matter about how basically there was like it's doing fine. But I forgot what your phrasing was, but basically the idea was that there is a possibility that 16 could be the final issue, but it all really depends on performance in like this arc and everything. And so that's why the people are, I presume, asking and talking about that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say if people talk about that, you always assume it means worst case scenario. But to be honest, like what I said, there's borderline, because the thing about the Power Fantasy is 16 is a really good end. Like, we could end it. And the problem is I have another end to Power Fantasy, but it's significantly further out. So it's not like, are we doing good numbers at 16? It's the question, would we be doing good numbers at 31?
Right.
And that's like, and I don't really want to go past 16 unless I know I can get to the place where I think I've got a good ending again. You know what I mean? Because there's not much point in getting a more lackluster ending if, So that's the real issue there. And plus, there's another issue in that, maybe we're just emotionally exhausted and we want to stop. This book is hard. Like, so even like, I think not even, you know what I mean? Like, so there's multiple reasons why we might want to stop at 16 or have a break. Like, we at least have a break, I think. Like, we'll take a breather and then see where we are. Let me rephrase that. That's not true. We'll take a breather knowing what we're going to do. Like, I think it's not going to be 1 month and straight back, even in a best case scenario.
I do think it's interesting because, like, in your most recent newsletter, you talked about how the trade sales were 500% of normal, because, I mean, you don't have but it was just like it was a thing that happened. There is like a part of me that wonders if, like, I'm not trying to say you were like being very calculated and you're like, I'm going to activate my audience. I'm going to sell 5 copies of the Beta Band's 3 EPs right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were basically just talking about this is the reality of the book, because like for listeners that don't know, a book could be doing perfectly fine at 12. The question is, will attrition, meaning the issue by issue drop off in sales, kill it, make it untenable by the end of it? And that's what you have to project out. And so I do wonder if like talking about it kind of made people realize like, oh yeah, like I need to remember to buy that trade that I have been sitting on for a little while, or just activating the audience in a real way, because like it's hard not to look at that release and then have a correlation right afterwards of a significant increase in sales. It feels related.
I absolutely was trying to activate people to sort of pass stuff on. Like I mentioned like a couple of podcasts that do the word of mouth, as if word of mouth is all indie books have. And that's indie podcasts. No one will know about it. This is the line I use repeatedly. Everybody knows who Batman is. Nobody knows who the Power Fantasy is until you tell them. Like it's absolutely reliant on that. In fact, and this is the things I do. That's all books. And it's one of the reasons why I might be preempting a question later, but like, I do these little capsule reviews in Image in the back of the Power Fantasy, which run as house ads in many other books in Image. And like the reason why I did that was, I was chatting to Eric, and Eric was noting how rare house ads are at Image books now. And I realized, which is a bit of a shame, because that's one of the few bits of mutual support Image books do. And I realized that's completely true of my books, because I always try to fill my books with all the content, because I'm just trying to sell this comic. And I'm not really thinking about the larger structural things. So
you think of it as a unit too. It's like if you put a house ad in, it throws off the unit. So yeah.
Like you'd have to do a house ad in a Power Fantasy way, which are all ways of doing. I've definitely considered this. Oh no, wait a second. I won't do a house ad, but I'll do capsule reviews of the New Image books, and make it and give it to people who can yada. And the thing is, if someone's bought an Image book, one thing about them: they will buy an Image book.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's really hard to reach people now, the idea of creating a sort of conversation, all that stuff going out. So me writing that, it's about my book, but it's also about all your books. The idea of this kind of something you love, it's definitely worth sharing. And the kind of, especially in the way social media works now, that kind of taking an active agency in your world, I think it's important. And we return to like some of my classic stuff in terms of like reminding people of the power they have to do what they wish and help the art they want in the world. And my least favourite thing is self-serving. As you say, absolutely has helped Power Fantasy sales, it seems. But at the same time, like, I think I do enough which isn't self-serving as well, like, which makes me feel better about it. I'm doing that face, so I'm not sure. I'm pretty hard on myself, though.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. IDW is absolutely cooking in November, as they're bringing readers exciting comics everywhere, including on 3 of its biggest lines. Want spooky tales and award-winning titles like Patrick Horvath's Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, or continuations of horror classics like Event Horizon or Twilight Zone? IDW Dark is for you. Want to see those heroes in the half shell and their friends doing their thing? The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles line has 4 big releases this month, including a crossover with an even bigger green guy in Godzilla. Speaking of Godzilla, want to see the wildest take on that character in his world yet? The Kaisei era is for you then, as Godzilla Escape the Dead Zone, and Starship Godzilla are bringing the heat. Most importantly, if you're looking for great comics, IDW has you covered. So stop on by your local comic shop and pick up their next big releases. And now, back to the show. I honestly, I think that, I don't know. I'm pretty bashful about talking about my stuff. It's not that I don't believe in it. I just I feel weird just constantly tooting my own horn, so to speak. And I think everyone does to some degree. But the thing is unless you develop some sense of urgency with people, it can be hard to get them to move, because they're just I assume this will always be there until completion. And assumptions are difficult. They're always difficult. But I do think that in this environment where creator-owned's a little weird. I mean, not creator-owned, but creator-owned and originals and everything like that is great to be an absolute book. Is it so easy to be, a original book over at Boom or something like that? Maybe not as easy. And I think that creating a sense of urgency is a very important thing to do. And I think it was smart of you to do in that, even if I don't know. I the thing is you position in such a way that I don't know. I think you're just reminding people that they need to support the things they love. And I think that's something we all could be reminded of.
I think it's true. Like, I hope that's true. I mean, like, I find all of it crushingly embarrassing, being very English in that kind of like, I retweet quite a lot. It's
not what we do.
I know it's not my thing, but like on a Blue Sky, I repost a lot of people being nice about the Power Fantasy when they tag me, and I hate doing that. And it's not like it's just literally I can't just post about the Power Fantasy every day. Me retweeting it is a kind of me just going, here is a reminder the Power Fantasy exists if you're not aware of it.
Yeah.
And like all this is like fundamentally embarrassing, but it's also necessary. And also it's one of the bits I feel quite bad about being, talking about this about the Power Fantasy. As we've got sales and awareness that I think many books would kill for. Like, but specifically right now, like the Power Fantasy's got a really cool little fan base. If you go to the Reddit or like on the League of Comic Geeks, there's a lot of people talking about them. Like the Power Fantasy, like Reddit has a lot of people just doing threads about theories and all that. And it's taken quite up to this point to really be cooking, which is kind of the best time to activate a fan base, I guess, because there's a fan base to activate. Because that's one of the things about, it's the mass dynamics of things. It's mass dynamics of fans interacting with fans, is something that helps categorize them together. But it's also like, it's the weirdest thing in the world, of course, is how easy it was to sell Wictive, the more successful it was. It's like space launches and gravity wells and all that kind of stuff.
It's a self-perpetuating engine at some point.
Yeah, it's petrifying. I find it weird. And I hate talking about this because we've turned up back from commerce to art. Sorry, like art to commerce again. You know what I mean?
I know.
But it's that kind of, you said one of your first questions, I did quite dodge it, but I certainly didn't engage with it enough. It's how much do you think about the commercial side? And sort of clearly, on some level, quite a lot. But it's much more done instinctively in terms of like knowing how the graphs look. And like the entire truth of a creator own book is your sales will start high and sort of tail off. And your trades will start here and kind of go up. And at some point, the trades will start making more money than the single issues. And the art is, can you get that trades being high enough before the single issues drop
off?
That's actually, and that's the magic. And it's like, if you're losing money in the single issues, losing is a quotation marks thing. It doesn't matter because you've already made the money back. And that's the art. That's the kind of guts the math you're running in your head. And it's one of the reasons why I plan. Here's something cynical. That's one reason Power Fantasy being free trades was the original thought, because free trades justifies making the first trade $10 for me. Because that's an interesting. Because otherwise, you need multiple trades to make up the money you've lost on the first issue due to the first trade selling higher. It's just graphs. I hate it.
I mean, it's you hate it, but it's like, I don't know. I think about like when I had Brian K. Vaughan on the podcast last, he said that when Saga was on break, it sold more than when it was not on break. And like, I hate to be like this, but the thing is like these comics only survive if they have the support to make those graphs work properly. Saga is a terrible example. Saga is like immortal. Like it could run for 1,000 years. It'd be like Arrakis. I mean, it can just go forever. But I think the thing that is interesting about it though is like I'm sure that there's probably a version of this world where the Power Fantasy ended with issue 6. And it's interesting because it's like, as a reader, like I feel like I'm not trying to discount the lead in stuff, but I feel like issues 11 and 12 was where things just went into overdrive, where with stuff with Etienne Lux is really, really cooking. And it's like, you can see the long-term plans. And if you're like still dropping bombs like that in issue 12 about Etienne, I'm not going to say what happened. What does 31 have in store for us? And like, that's the thing is like, I don't know. I mean, like activating audiences is essential because it unleashes the art and it feels icky. So how do you balance that?
It's like kind of like if you're working commercial artist as essentially a pop artist, that might, that's ongoings. You're on tour. There's an element of like, because you sort of say like issue 11 and 12 are bombs, like, and the rest of the arc is kind of the same. Like, I think every issue is something like you just did. Like, really, I think it's like everything has been
Jackie
set up
Magus
for here. Yeah, there's a lot going on. Like, but from 13 to 16 as well. Like, I think 12, 11, in fact, 12. I'll do the math. Actually, I'm not going to rate them out of 10, but like 12 isn't the biggest. Like, I was a bit worried that 12 was too quiet.
Interesting.
Yeah. And this is one of it because everything's been put on that. And I sort of knew right at the start, this is where, if it kicks off and it becomes something else, it'll be around here. You know what I mean? Because it's that kind of like, it's entirely possible people go, oh, look, it's cooking so much every issue we need to be on now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, and people, oh, have you seen this? Have you seen that? That's kind of what you want. That's the thrill of an ongoing book. In that kind of, yeah, buying it in trades is really fun, and buying single issues is also really fun, and that's what we're trying to encourage. Yeah, I remember something like actually, I don't want to. So let's not go into that hole. But yes is the answer in short.
I mean, I hate to bring up like literally the most successful comic in single issues right now, but it's like I think that's kind of one of Absolute Batman's secret or superpowers, not secret superpowers. Superpowers is the fact that like every issue has something so psychotic that it instantly like goes viral, and it's like it's pretty smart. But
yeah, what's Batman done now? You know, amazing.
Yeah, he kicked a child, and everyone wants to share that because everyone thinks it's hilarious. I do want to ask about like you're 12 issues in, you know where you're going. Are there any characters that have surprised you so far, whether that's like a surprise for you or a surprise about someone who has really resonated with people?
Wow. I hate answering no to this kind of question because it implies everything is like, yeah, you do feel like you're like Ozymandias sitting there going, yes, no, this is all according to plan. But no, like this, it's more like the problem of the power fantasy is the stuff that's disturbing and upsetting to me I saw coming. Like, it's that kind of like, what I do with Eliza is really upsetting. The joy is specific bits of execution. Like the fact that I've got the structure kind of nailed down, as in this issue, this happens, just really small details, like stuff that, Heavy does, like some of the more issues I've written more recently, and little bits of character interaction. That's where the joy is. And like, cats are just a little bit crueler than you expect, or kinda, you know, any like, but almost like expressions of character which you didn't plan but you just see and was instantly perfect. It's like the issue 11 when Valentina turns up with a birthday cake. Of course she does. You know what I mean? Like, that's the bit that gets you. But it's like I always, you know, Isabella and Masumi. They're kind of the intense weirdness of their characters. You know, in terms of that the particularly terrible, awful relationship at the heart of the book. So all the stuff is being kind of there, I guess is what we're saying.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when we talked about it not the first time, but we did a big interview on Sketched at the beginning of 2024, I want to say, or it was middle of 2024, somewhere around there. And we talked about how it was interesting to you to see where like consensus was landing in terms of who was like the popular characters or the heroes or whatever. Has that still surprised you at all?
Not so. I think it's more that I'm interested. It's that kind of.
Yeah.
There was a reading group I was with, and I sort of, the question I posed to people is, vote who do you think the villain is? And like they did a vote.
I bet you got every character as an answer.
Yeah, is that? But they did the standard deviation of the characters. So like certain characters, like how heroic or negative do you think they are? And certain characters at the moment, Valentina's quite high. Her band's quite above, you know, close to the good. Etienne is all the way down from the bottom to the top. Like people have very strong opinions on Etienne, as is right. You know what I mean? I mean, and I like that. It's one of those situations that they're like, I see them as six characters who are basically good, quotation marks, and have too much power to ever be good. It's like kind of one of the fundamental theses of the book is that after a certain amount, all power is immoral. And then what do you do? And that's what I find interesting. Like, because I've said who's the villain. So it's kind of shook up when characters do something really awful. Like they go down or up. And I think like at issue 16, people have very different opinions again. Like that's what I kind of want, as in like seeing their kind of the awful calculus of the people's personalities. Yeah, I love them all. Like honestly, there's bits where I kind of like really, especially when they're petty and human, because it's one of the bits they start a philosophy. You know, obviously each has a different idea of how to approach power, but they're not ciphers. These are like, even Etienne, who of course tries very hard to be a cipher, isn't a cipher. So my favorite thing about Etienne is like how well dressed he is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a fundamental vainness to Etienne. You know what I mean? And that's like just there and it kind of bubbles through it and you can start reading into them in various ways. And like, even like, this is so much Casper stuff, because Casper absolutely gets the clothes there, but how bad Heavy's looks are half the time. Occasionally Heavy is really rocking it, but like suddenly it's 1981 and he's got a mullet and a moustache and it looks awful. It's like Heavy just makes mistakes.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's all the way through that's literally issue 1 where he nearly ends the world. You know?
I mean, that's the thing that I think is really fascinating about the book is like, I think part of the reason why again, not to do a superhero comp here, but it's like, I think part of the reason why a character like Thanos or like Killmonger in the Marvel movies resonates so much is because like there's a part of some people that are like, I kind of get where they're coming from. And like Etienne is perfect in that regard, in the sense that like a lot of is this, I mean, they're utilitarian, they're built in rational thought, but is utilitarianism always the right answer? I don't know. I mean, and then like somebody like Heavy is the opposite in the spectrum, where everything is emotion. And it's like, I don't know, in a weird way, to go back to Die, it kind of feels like characters that are set up on a different spectrum to balance each other out in terms of emotion and pragmatism and everything else.
Yeah. There's one
I'm a
like,
birthday cake guy. That's why I like Valentina.
That's honestly, who doesn't like birthday cake? So people often this is a general rule. People ask, who is your favorite character? That's a very common question. And for me, the answer is always no. I create the characters as a social group. You know, they exist to shine lights on each other. So I can't really separate them. That's not what I do. And that's the same true of Die. And it's one of the bits where, like, to skip over to RPGs, I really try to encourage players to create, in fact, Die specifically, you create the group, your players together. So it's not like anyone comes to the table and says who they are, specifically because you're making it people, because the only point of drama is your interactions with everybody else. Like the atomic, you know, a lot of what I do is kind of the atomic nature of individuals, ironically, with a book about, you know, the characters literally called Atomic. But yeah, all that. So yeah, I kind of hope the characters illuminate themselves in different ways. Honestly, like, Casper's killing it. There's some really beautiful, like, and he's like really burning hard in a level of like, he needs to sleep. But stuff he does is like inspiring and human and just echoes through it. You know, I'm really proud of him. That's
Well,
a weird
and
thing
then
to say,
there's
but I am.
what is Heavy's kid's name?
Kid Ignition.
Kid Ignition. Yeah. I mean, like, there's just something so inspired when you get, like, you're going further and further into this, and all of a sudden there's this weird new metal kid that shows up that is like a superpower. I mean, spoilers for a Korn. I don't know if he's into Korn. I don't know what kind of new metal he's into, but he feels like he is. And like, that's like the beauty of the timeline you have, but also the different characters is like, what is a superpower like when they grew up on new metal energy from the 90s? Really fucking weird.
Honestly, like, it's Kid Ignition is like, even the name. I'm really good fun with the names. Like sitting down and trying to work out what to call them.
Yeah.
We did a teaser. We do teasers every issue online, but it was this 17-year-old Limp Bizkit fan has the power to destroy the world. What could go wrong? And my favorite thing about that is we chose Limp Bizkit. We thought that was the funniest 1990s new metal band to say, but I don't think Kid Ignition was a big Limp Bizkit fan. I think that's unfair to him. He would probably like Korn.
Yeah. I feel like he'd be like the thinking man's new metal. I don't think it would be like the Limp Bizkit side of things. I'm excited to see what comes down the line, Kieron. I'm sure you have, I mean, it sounds like we have bombs being dropped on us every single issue going up to issue 16 and beyond. But that's for another day. That is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about the Power Fantasy, Die Loaded, and everything else. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Love to be here. Thank you.